The knock was deliberate, almost surgical, 3 solid raps against the front door that sliced through the dead silence of the night. It wasn't frantic, wasn't tentative. It was the kind of knock that didn't care it was 3:12 a.m., didn't care that the whole street was asleep. It came with an expectation, an assumption that whoever was inside would comply. In the darkness of his room, 17-year-old Mason Reed sat up, disoriented, heart thudding against his ribs. His digital clock glowed in the corner, red numbers blinking insistently. He held his breath, hoping he had imagined it. But then, the knock came again, louder this time, more insistent. It bypassed thought and plunged straight into instinct. A rustle at his door snapped him out of his daze. His 10-year-old sister, Ella, slipped into the room like a ghost, her oversized t-shirt hanging off her small frame. Her eyes were enormous in the low light, not with confusion, but raw, unfiltered fear. "They're at the back door," she whispered. 3 men. They're wearing badges. Like HOA badges. Orange ones. They have clipboards. Mason blinked, struggling to process. Homeowners Association visits at 3 in the morning? It made no sense. "One of them's got a crowbar," Ella added, her voice even smaller. A chill seeped through Mason's bones, one no amount of closed windows could keep out. In their neighborhood, the HOA was annoying, sure sending notices about overgrown hedges and misplaced garbage cans, but they didn't show up in the middle of the night. And they certainly didn't come armed. Before Mason could reply, he heard it downstairs, a soft crash, like glass shattering, followed by muffled voices. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't someone needing help. It was intrusion. Mason rose to his feet, his muscles tight, adrenaline flooding his veins. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to call for help. The second his father, Daniel Reed, emerged from his bedroom, the air shifted. Daniel was a retired Navy SEAL. 20 years of hard-earned instincts and discipline flooded back into him in an instant. One glance at Mason's face, pale and alert, was all he needed to know something was wrong. He didn't waste time with questions. He moved. In the master bedroom, behind the clothes and coats in the closet, sat a heavy biometric safe. Daniel pressed his thumb to the reader. A soft beep, a metallic click, and the door swung open. Inside, his tools were lined up with military precision. From the safe, Daniel retrieved a compact AR-15, loaded it with practiced ease, and chambered a roundel in total silence. He turned to Mason, voice low, calm. "Stay behind me," he said. "If they cross the line, we don't talk. We act." Mason nodded, his throat too dry to speak. Downstairs, the voices grew bolder. A man's voice floated through the house, falsely cheerful. "We've had reports of code violations," he said. "Just need to do a quick inspection." Mason crept to a window, careful to stay low. He lifted a corner of the blind. 3 figures stood under the porch light. They wore reflective vests and badges clipped to their belts, but their outfits didn't match cargo pants, hoodies, cheap sneakers. One man held a clipboard, another a walkie-talkie. The third, the biggest, shifted something heavy behind a folded pamphlet, a crowbar. These weren't officials. These weren't neighbors. They were predators. Daniel was already moving down the stairs, silent as a shadow. Mason followed, keeping low, every muscle in his body wired tight. The back door handle rattled, then a faint metallic click broke the silence. They were picking the lock. Daniel positioned himself in the shadows of the hall, rifle ready but pointed low, steady as stone. "Last warning," he said, voice carrying no fear, only inevitability. Outside, one of the intruders stiffened. He turned his head, searching for the voice, but seeing nothing. Seconds later, he forced the door open and stepped inside. He didn't get far. A shot rang out sharp, deafening. Daniel fired a warning round into the ceiling. Drywall rained down. The intruder froze, clipboard slipping from his hand with a hollow clatter. "Down, face on the ground," Daniel commanded, calm and final. The man bolted instead, slipping and crashing back into the night. But the threat wasn't over. The second man surged forward, a pistol drawn, pointed toward the living room. Daniel fired twice, controlled and precise. The first bullet struck the man's shoulder, spinning him around. The second hit lower, dropping him onto the tile floor with a groan. His gun skidded across the room, spinning under a chair. Mason crouched on the stairs, frozen, until he saw a third man, sneaking around the side of the house toward the dining room window. This time, Mason didn't think. He acted. He sprinted to the fireplace, grabbed the iron poker, and hurled himself at the window just as fingers curled around the frame. With a roar he didn't recognize in himself, Mason swung the poker. The glass shattered, raining shards onto the floor. The intruder recoiled with a grunt of surprise and pain, retreating into the darkness. Daniel turned at the crash, rifle ready, but when he saw Mason standing there breathing hard, the poker in his hands, blood trickling down one forearm from the broken glass, something in Daniel's eyes softened. Pride. The sirens came then, a wail rising over the rooftops, red and blue lights flickering into view. Daniel laid his rifle on the dining table, chamber open, safety engaged. He stepped away from it, hands raised, stance open. When the police burst through the door, Daniel spoke first, voice clear and strong. Homeowner. Unarmed. 2 suspects inside, 1 fled. The officers fanned out, securing the scene. The second man, bleeding and dazed, was cuffed and treated. The third was found collapsed near a neighbor's fence, scratched and bruised. The 4 the lookout escaped into the woods. Hours passed. Mason sat quietly on the couch, a blanket draped around his shoulders. Ella clung to his side. Daniel gave his statement calmly. No exageración, no brevado. And the police listened. You handled this by the book, the senior officer said, nodding. 3 days later, the district attorney made it official. No charges. Clear self-defense. News crews flooded the street. Stories filled the airwaves. Retired Navy SEAL foils home invasion. Brave teen defends family. But Daniel refused interviews. He didn't want the attention. He grilled steaks in the backyard that weekend, the smell of charcoal and seasoned meat rising into the warm spring air. Ella laughed for the first time in days, chasing the dog across the lawn. Mason tossed a football with a neighbor. The scars remained the patched bullet hole in the ceiling, the boarded-up window, but so did something stronger. An understanding. A new weight to the word home. Mason saw his father differently now. Not just as dad, but as the quiet, steady shield that stood between safety and chaos. And Mason knew, deep in his bones, that if the time ever came again, he wouldn't freeze. He would stand the line too, just like his father.